please give them a chance after the program to stop and visit. We've got everything from flood insurance to flood monitors to the weather service and all that stuff. So take some time to visit. Tonight, Duke Energy has sponsored tonight. They I guess, know that we really like to see their trucks come after a hurricane. I know I sat on my front porch and cheered and cried when I saw them come at Marshallburg after Florence. So anyway, we're here not to mourn Florence. We're not here to tell our story again about how bad we were bombed, because we were. But we're here to get ready for the next one. Because if you think for 1 minute there's not going to be a next one, talk to Eric at the weather service. We just don't know what her name's going to be, and we don't know how long she's going to stay, but we know she's coming. And so tonight is about looking at our situation down east, our roads, our communications, all the things that we depend on the other side of a storm, and are we ready? And I especially want to thank Gene Foxworth and Steve Gray and Chris Chadwick and now Greg Hartman, who have helped lead the way to make tonight possible. And I also want to thank Gordy Ure, because there's been a lot of questions in this informal, unscientific, throw it out there, see what happens survey that I took. And a lot of responses came back about roads. And if you're ever on Facebook, you know in bad weather, you know that everybody's worried about the road. So let's listen. The plan is for 10 minutes. Catherine and Miyuki are going to tell you about what the flood monitors that are now placed down east are saying. They've got 10 skinny minutes. 10 skinny minutes. And then Eric's going to come, and he's got 20 skinny minutes to talk about storm surge and flooding. And then we're going to hand it over to Stephen Ray. So hold on. We've got a lot to talk about. Thank you.
All right, this is a little short. So I'm not sure if this is...
So move it.
There we go. I'm not sure if this is going to take 10 minutes. The facts on flooding, or what we've found over the past year, are pretty straightforward. So I'm Catherine Anardi. I'm an assistant professor at NC State.
And I'm Miyuki Hino. I'm an assistant professor at UNC Chapel Hill.
And we've been monitoring flooding in Down East over the past year. So what you're looking at up here are 3 images of flooding. Sea level is on the right. It's a little bit hard to see with this light, so I don't know if you can dim it. And we've had sensors that are measuring floods on land, on roads, where people live. In Down East, we've had a sensor in sea level for the past year. We installed it back in April. And then after that, we installed a sensor in Davis, and also at the North River Bridge, and now at Cedar Island. And we're adding another one in Marshallburg. I'm not going to bore you with the science of our sensors. If you want to get bored, we can show you them over here. What I want to show you on this slide is how the flooding in Down East compares to flooding elsewhere in the state. And when I'm talking about flooding, I'm not talking about the Florences, the extreme storms, the hurricanes. I'm talking about the everyday floods that you guys are experiencing, from tides, from rain, from wind. So when I have on that slide 124 days of flooding in sea level, that's 124 days outside of extreme events. So there was water on the road and sea level 124 days over the past year. So about a third of the year. And these aren't really deep floods. On average, they're less than a foot in the road. The maximum, I think, was 1.5 feet. But they last between 3 and 8 hours. And they limit, as you can tell from this photo, accessibility in this area. So across the state, what we've seen elsewhere, we have sensors in coastal communities in Carolina Beach and Beaufort, nearby. It's flooding a lot in down east, more so than these other regions. So here are those numbers again for down east, just for the sea level sensor. 124 days. Sometimes the water came up in the road and back out again more than once per day. So that's why we have 153 floods over those 124 days. Now, what about extreme events like hurricanes? That only adds, at least for this past year, 5 more days to our total count. So we didn't have a very active storm season last year, and most of the drivers of these floods were your everyday winds and tides and rainfall.
So up here you can see a screenshot of our website. These are the locations of the sensors that Catherine just mentioned. You can click on, so if you go to downeastflooding.com, you can click on any of these sensors. It will take you to our most recent camera image from that location. And you can also go and look at the water levels. So how much water are we observing on the road, if we are observing water on the road. Those function in real time. So the idea is that if you need to know, if you are curious about what's going on with flooding in any one of these locations, you can do that from our website. Ideally all the time, but whenever our sensors are working. Very close to all the time. Most of the time. We try really hard. We do try really hard. Here are images from, this is an image from Davis in addition to the sea level shot that you saw in the previous slide. These are from February of this past year. So as you can see, again, this is a situation where it's not an extreme event, it's not a big named hurricane that you have weeks or days of advance notice on. These are routine, everyday events that we're picking up. In terms of what's next for us, we're continuing to maintain these sensors and cameras, so these should be operational and available for you to check. Certainly this coming storm season, and as long as we can keep them going. We have PhD students. Ryan is right here, raise your hand, Ryan. And James Collins couldn't make it tonight, but they will be living here for the summer and are hoping to learn more about your experiences with flooding, your thoughts on what might be done about the flooding. And we're using the data that we're collecting, both from the sensors and cameras and from Ryan and James's conversations and interviews, to plan community events to focus not just on what data we're collecting, what we're seeing that's happening right now, but also how might we respond to that and what types of mitigation strategies might be effective for different locations in the region. So please stay tuned for details on that, because we would love to have lots of participation in this event. Yes, that's it.
Good evening, everyone. Really appreciate everybody joining us. My name is Eric Hayden. I'm a meteorologist with the Weather Service in Newport, Morehead City. Just a quick show of hands. How many have heard a talk from the Weather Service on hurricane preparedness? Was it with me? Yeah. So we have some repeat customers. That means it's pretty good. So raise your hand if you've lived in down East Carteret, Harkers Island, Smyrna, wherever you might be for less than 3 years. We're not picking on you, but we have a lot of new folks to the community. So those that have heard these messages over and over and over again. This is the first time for about a third of this audience that have not lived through a hurricane or even a hurricane season. So we try to break it down, do one thing today after this talk to get prepared. It's not to scare you, but season has started. We've had storms as early as June or July, so don't think you have until September to prepare. Focus on the impacts. Water is what kills people. And last one, never, ever, ever, not ever, just focus on the category of the storm. If you didn't hear this, you're probably under a rock. This is going to be a busy season, predicted to be an 85% chance above normal for storms. We usually don't show this slide that much because it really doesn't matter unless it hits here. We could have the most active season on record, but unless it hits where we live, we forget about it. So we really want you to prepare each and every year. However, when there's this many storms predicted, our chance is higher. So really waving our hands to prepare this year for sure, really for sure. One of the best ways to get our information from us is our local website. We are local. We're down the road in Newport, just past Morehead City. We have 122 offices in the Weather Service. You have one here in Carteret County. This is your weather service. You pay taxes to fund us. We fall under the Department of Commerce and NOAA. That's your building. My business cards are over at the table. You're welcome to take a tour. We're in the community all the time. Please come and interact with us. To remember this website, we always love a good joke in the government. If it's a weather you love, it's weather.gov. That's all you need to remember. You can click anywhere in the country, but if you click on Eastern North Carolina, you'll get the local office. If you're going to Wyoming for vacation this summer, you click up there, you'll get the local office. Tremendous amount of information. Marine forecasts, climate information, preparedness, it's all on our local website. Another really good one, and for the fancy users in the audience, if you don't know how to do it, turn toward a younger person, that crazy little thing in the upper right. You can scan that and you can save it to your phone. The Hurricane Center. We work with them in Miami. Instead of weather.gov, it's hurricanes.gov. And we know we don't like hurricanes, so we won't say a joke with that. One of the most important things you can do each day as we move through hurricane season, spend 30 seconds in the morning, check out the Hurricane Center site. You can get to it from us as well. Check out the Tropical Weather Outlook. 4 times a day, we will tell you what is going to happen over the next 7 days. Is there anything to be concerned about? No, just move it along and get ready for the next day. It's nothing to be overly worried about, but this is something, just kind of stay in tune for what's happening with the tropical activities. That's a really good thing to check out every day. Raise your hand if you've ever seen this graphic before, this forecast cone. Most of us, right? It's probably one of the more popular ones, also one of the more misunderstood ones. What this shows is the path, the most probable path for the center of the storm. 2/3 of the time it's going to stay in that cone. 1/3 of the time we're going to be wrong. So that's one thing to remember. We have become a lot more accurate, knock on wood, with the forecast track. That forecast cone is also on a diet. Unlike Mr. Eric, who loves the food tonight, thank you very much, and loves Eastern North Carolina food. That cone continues to get smaller and smaller because it's based on past history. It has nothing to do with the current storm. It's only showing where, statistically, we think the storm is going to go. A hurricane's not a dot on the map. This is not a, I'm in the cone, I need to pay attention. Whew, it's down toward Charleston, I don't have to worry about it. If you're anywhere in the general vicinity of this storm or this path, you should pay attention. For example, as Florence got closer, we were not in the path of the storm. And as a meteorologist, we were correct. We had a 5-mile error. It hit Wrightsville Beach, we were correct. This only shows where the center will go. We know impacts occur well away from it. So pay attention to it. If it's anywhere on the East Coast, you should be paying attention to it. It's not an in or out type of thing. Some other graphics on the Hurricane Center site, we've got a lot of stuff on there. When are the tropical storm force winds going to get here? What's the earliest they may get here? Lots of great information. You don't have to be a backyard meteorologist. I encourage you to follow official sources, Carteret County, local news, National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center. For the new folks, there's not going to be a lack of information. There's plenty of information. Your job is to focus on the official, consistent pieces of information. Does it mean we get it right every time? No. But does it mean that we're very consistent and very deliberate with what we do? Yes. We live in your community. It doesn't behoove me to hype anything up. I get paid the same today standing here as I did during Dorian or Florence. We care about you, focus on official sources. That's what you have control over. So please focus on official pieces of information. That really goes with social media. If you search NWS for National Weather Service, Morehead City, we're all over the place. You can do your part in your community by sharing this information. Because as you share official sources, you're not going to worry about that storm 2 weeks out that everybody's hyping up that never happens. We don't need to get the community alarmed when they don't need to be alarmed. So please focus on official local sources of information. A lot of good information there. All right, so that's how you can find things. There's also a good website that we have, Know Your Zone for the county, what to put in your hurricane kit. We've got graphics in English and Spanish, videos for the deaf and hard of hearing, a lot of good information on our website. You can just add /hurricane prep, or again, if you use your camera, you can scan that code in the upper right. The bottom bullet point is extremely important. During a storm and leading up to it is extremely stressful. Where are you going to go? Should you leave? Do you have enough food and water? What's going to happen to your business? What's going to happen to your house? Very stressful. Today, not stressful. We're not even into June yet. So thinking about things now in terms of planning, do it when you have not had a lot of stress in your life is a much more successful outcome when you don't have a lot going on. We get asked a lot, what's the outlook, and then what should I do to prepare for hurricane season? It's a 3-step process. You are at step 1. What is your vulnerability? Do you live in a low-lying area? Have you flooded before? Those are all weather factors. Who lives in your home? Do you have elderly parents? Is somebody reliant on electricity like oxygen? Are you a young person that can just pick up and move? Or do you have other family members, pets, people to consider? That is your vulnerability. That's your responsibility to think about today. We live in an awesome area. That's why people continue to move it here. It's our responsibility to prepare each and every year. And it starts with your vulnerability. If your vulnerability is high, you might have to have a really good plan to get out of here. If your vulnerability is really high and you're not leaving, well, then you better have that kit maybe 10 or 14 days instead of the standard 3. So determine what your vulnerability is today. Step 2, everybody should have a hurricane kit. Bare minimum at the bottom of the ground is at least 3 days. Food, water, medicine, anything you would need to survive. If you have young kids, formula, diapers, pets, what would they need? Make sure you're not low on prescriptions. There's been a lot of financial hardship the last couple of years. Chief Ray and Beaufort had talked about this with this line. I always steal it from him. It's a lot to do in one weekend or 1 week or 1 month. Spread it out. Get your canned goods this weekend. Next month, get your bottled water. That will spread out the financial impact, but also ensure that you actually do it. A kit is extremely important. Supplies will run out. If you wait until it gets active, this is not a scare tactic. You'll see the shelves with the lack of water and everything you need. So again, up to a week would be best if you can do it. To be on your own. And for some of you that are going to stay, we saw it's many, many days, a week, 10 days without power. So if you could really have enough to be on your own for that period of time would be most beneficial. So vulnerability, make the kit, and then step 3, everybody should have a plan. Even if you say, I'm never, ever, ever, ever going to leave, have a plan on where you would go. I like at least 2 options. My option A was my family in Maryland. That's where I grew up. Option A is off the table because they moved down to Swansboro near me. So now my vulnerability is up. 3 kids, mom, so my vulnerability is a lot higher because I stay. So our option B is we've got family in South Carolina, so that's where they would go. Great time to visit your relatives in Ohio that come down here. Great time to check out a hotel or a vacation out of this area. It's way more comfortable in a hotel with AC. Your last resort would be any type of sheltering. Your last resort would be staying here and having the water come up in your home. You're more comfortable out of this area. So have that plan. Even if you don't think you'll ever leave, have those options so when you say, hey, you know what, I'm getting out of here, I know where to go. If you have pets, make sure the hotels take those animals and so forth. It's easy to decide that on May 30th or whatever today's date is versus the storm is 2 days out. So we're going to finish the talk, and Miss Karen said I had 20 minutes. I think I'm still doing well. There's a lot to go over. If you were not aware of this, especially newcomers, we are the most prone stretch of coastline in the entire United States. We stick out, we get a lot of storms, it just happens. So now is the time to prepare. Again, you don't want to wait until the storm gets here. Even a week out, supplies can get low. Just stock up on the water, get canned goods, start working on that now. Just a sample, San Sirocco storm, 1899. A lot of us have heard about that in the history books. Back before storms got named, in 1933, 1944, even more recently, just over 20 years ago, Isabel, Irene, Florence, Dorian, more an Ocracoke issue, the picture in the upper right. These are names that you're going to hear if you have not lived in this community. So if the graphic of most prone didn't get your attention, look at all those dates. Those are storms that have impacted, especially Carteret County and down east in eastern North Carolina. Just to re-emphasize that, and that is Dorian up the road in Ocracoke. So the time to prepare is now. Hurricane season doesn't start until June 1st, but we really say May. We've had an Arthur tropical storm, not the hurricane, in 2014 as early as May. The peak is traditionally about the 10th of September. I still remember in 2018, during Florence, prior to it, somebody saying, "Ooh, looks like we made it through hurricane season. The kids are back at school. It's after Labor Day." Before I could tell them to stop. We had Florence a couple weeks later. So again, once you get into late summer, new people to the area, we're not even halfway through the season. Some of our big ones have been into the months of September, but even October with Hurricane Matthew. Long season. This graph just shows the peak of tropical storms and hurricanes is about September 10th. But again, one concern I have, the water's warmer this year, earlier, so that's one of the factors for the season being more active. My concern is what happens when we get a storm in July. It's been a while, 2014 Arthur, in terms of like a significant one. So again, you don't have until September. You really should be thinking preparedness in the next couple weeks. We've gotten extremely accurate with forecasting. We still get the jokes. It must be nice to have a job you can get it wrong all the time. I know you've said it. It must be nice to be paid and get it wrong right half the time. We've heard all the jokes. But if you really look back, we have become a lot more accurate. However, they're hiring more people like me that can talk, because our issue is communication and understanding and believing that it could happen. It's not the science. Are we going to get it wrong in a track someday? Yes. But it's this. A lot of focus on category. Raise your hand and be honest with your neighbor and me. If you have said, or your significant other has said, "I'm not gonna." See, I already see a hand up. I'm not gonna leave unless it's at least a 2. I'm not gonna leave unless it's a 3. I know there's more of you that have said that. Categories just based on wind. It's to be respected. I'm not saying I wasn't concerned living in Cape Carteret with a Category 4 Florence coming our way. Very concerned. It's part of the puzzle. It's not the whole puzzle. Category says nothing about how much rain we're going to have, how large the storm is, how long it's going to sit over us, what side of the storm did we get hit with. Did we have 15 inches of rain the week before? Category is important. It's not the whole thing. If you need a reminder, think about Irene or Florence for those that have lived here. Water is what kills people in hurricanes. I'm a scientist, so I loved our little pie chart, and it showed all rip currents and marine threat. We got rid of that. That should stand out. Hazel, Isabel, Irene, sea level in Florence. That stands out. That's water. 85% of people that die in hurricanes is water related. Storm surge, flooding, or rip currents. Again, it's not to scare you, but that's the reality. Wind is to be respected. Does property damage? Could a tree fall in your home? Yes, but it's that is going to endanger your life. And where we live, with our lower sea level and proximity to water, this is our concern. It showed up on the survey that Ms. Karen gave out. I'm not telling you anything new, but it's something to emphasize. Past experience can hurt us. A lot of people in Florence said, "Oh, I've lived here for a long time. I've been through it all." A lot of our storms, like Dorian, especially here, we were on the left side of the storm, so we did not see the worst part of the storm. So some folks were caught off guard because they thought they had been through a lot of storms and they weren't on that right side. When the storm hit down toward Wrightsville Beach, we were on that right side of the storm. Irene's another good example. It's just a Category 1, hit by Cape Lookout. It was a large storm, slower moving, very impactful. For Arthur and most of our area, here we were impacted, but for most of eastern North Carolina, not really impacted. It was a Category 2, hit at the same location, but it was smaller and quicker moving. So your past experience can vary. There are no two storms that are alike. Just because you made it through Irene and Florence and Isabel, some of the worst storms we've ever had here, doesn't mean that the next one's not going to hit at high tide, during a king tide, where we already have higher water levels, and it's going to be worse. So don't let your guard down because you've lived here for a long time. It can be bad and worse than we've seen before. We're focusing a lot on post-storm. We're pretty good about making kits now. I think most of us have kits. They have plans. Don't forget about afterwards. We're a hardened community that wants to clean up and get back going as quickly as we can. When you get that generator, know how to use it. Don't use it inside. We lose lives each year due to carbon monoxide. If you don't do a lot of physical activity, you shouldn't be out in the yard picking everything up. We lose people to heart attacks. So don't lose it at the last mile. You've done your preparedness, you've evacuated. Don't rush back and cross a flooded road, and therefore. I hope, Miss Karen, I've got about 5 or 7 minutes left because we're on the home stretch. Tropical cyclones, this is what we want you to focus on, not the category. How much rain are we going to see? What's the surge? Rip currents, what's that about? Who's swimming? We'll talk about that. Wind and tornadoes. You're not going to have to decipher this. This is going to be on the local news. This is going to be on our local briefings. All that information is going to be there. So our area is vulnerable to storm surge. If you were not aware of that, that's a picture of Dorian down the road in Cedar Island. Don't assess your vulnerability based on past storms. Again, Isabel, Florence, about 6 or 7 feet of storm surge. That doesn't mean that's the highest we'll ever get, and I'll show you that here in a second. Does not have to make landfall in our area to cause an impact. Florence hit Wilmington, Wrightsville Beach. What if it hit Bogue Inlet? What if it hit as a 2 or 3 instead of 1? Keep that in mind. We had this is Dorian, we had 6 to 7 feet of surge. What if it was closer? So keep that in mind. These are 3 examples to emphasize this. Ophelia was just a tropical storm. Highway 12, Route 12 down to Cedar Island looked like that. I know it looks like that a lot of the time, but that's just a tropical storm. 4 to 5 feet of storm surge up the Pamlico and Neuse rivers from just a tropical storm. Almost hurricane strength hit by Emerald Isle last year. Dorian, 2019, Cedar Island flooding. I know we didn't have it as bad as Ocracoke, and most of us were okay, but it hit on Hatters. What if it was just a few miles to the left and we were on the right side of the storm? We would be Ocracoke. We were helping them during the storm. We had continued to recover from Florence. That could have been us very easily. And then Florence, 2018, thanks to the gentleman in the second row for the picture, again, that could have been a lot worse. It was a Category 1, and it hit down toward Wilmington. It could have been even worse, and it caused those damage. So just keep that in mind. I won't get into the definitions of what map this is, but a reasonable worst case in our area is a Category 3 storm with an Isabel track. Isabel was a 2 for those that have been here. That was some of the worst storm surge that we had seen. This is not an Armageddon or just a crazy scenario. A Category 3 is going to happen in our community. That's very reasonable. This is a reasonable worst case scenario in down East Carteret County. If you have trouble reading the numbers, the yellow is more than 3 feet. So most of where we're standing and most of down East Carteret County is more than 3 feet of storm surge. As you get into the oranges, that's 6. The reds is greater than 9. I love basketball. Basketball hoop is 10 feet high. New Bern had about 10 or 11 feet of storm surge in Florence. It can happen, and it is going to happen. This is a reasonable worst case scenario. When we give this, not every community will experience that. It all comes down to the very end. Exactly where does it hit? Does it hit at high tide or low tide? This does not take into account wave action on top of the surge. And again, this is very reasonable. If we saw 6 or 7 feet with a Cat 1 and 2, one in Florence that was not in our area, and a Cat 2 Isabel, which was in our area. It's not hard to think that we'll get more than 9 with a 3 that makes landfall like in Beaufort. So again, this is a reasonable consideration in our area, just to kind of put that in the back of your mind. For those that say, hey, I would never leave, I get it. When businesses, your livelihood is on the water. Your livelihood is fixing it as quickly as you can. I totally get it. Please keep it in the back of your mind. If we have this situation, you should have a plan to leave so that you know where to go down the road. Flash flooding, I won't cover super long. This is for those that choose to evacuate and come back, or maybe last minute. Water can carry a car very easily. We had over 2 feet of water, especially the western part of Carteret County. Water is extremely powerful. You can kind of tell it by this picture. About 18 inches could carry your car away. What you do not realize is the road might not exist underneath that water. This is very, very common. This is not a out west. Mr. Eric Googled the craziest flooding picture. This is from Snow Hill near Hookerton. We have images of Duplin County, Kenansville, Onslow County, Jones County. This is just very common where we have a little bit of terrain. Not talking Boone or Asheville terrain, I'm talking little humps. Compared to us, it's terrain. That's what can happen. So that's why we say don't cross flooded roads. Most deaths occur in vehicles from water. We lost, we lost 15 people in Florence in North Carolina. 11 out of the 15 were water related. All 11 were in vehicles. It's like having a smoke detector in your home. Do never, ever, ever cross a flooded road. It's extremely powerful. You don't know if the road exists. River flooding, I'm talking inland, Highway 70, your Kinstons. It's hard to get back to the area. That is why a lot of people stay, because it's hard to get back. But that is the reality. If you choose to leave, you're not going to be able to snap your fingers and come back. Just understanding that. Not discouraging leaving, but it is reality. We're at the end, the mountains and the ocean, the water drains down to the ocean. It takes a long time for those rivers to come down. Rip currents, they occur well ahead or after a storm. Does anybody remember Lorenzo in 2019? Are you sure? We lost 8 people on the East Coast, 4 in North Carolina, more than with Dorian. It was 2,000 miles away, but it caused a strong swell in October, nice beach weather, and we lost 4 people at our beaches in North Carolina. So encourage folks that are out of town, swim at lifeguarded beaches that late in the season, swim left or right, swim parallel. If you're pulled out, a rip current will not pull you under, it pulls you out. Rip currents kill more people than a lot of weather factors in North Carolina, on average about 10. So that's why we put it in here. Second to last is wind. We do get wind with storms. This is Arthur in 2014, early July storm. Hopefully we don't have a repeat. You had winds of 90 to 100 miles per hour in our area with this Category 2 storm. If it had been a little bit farther left or west, more Carteret County would have been hit. The point of emphasis with this is just a small wiggle causes a big difference. If Dorian, it paralleled our coast. If it just had wobbled 15 or 20 miles to the left, that's nothing in terms of meteorologists. In terms of the whole globe, that's just a drop in the bucket. It would have been a lot worse in our area for Dorian. Last but not least, does anybody recognize the pier in the upper right? It's Bow Inlet Pier. EF2 tornado during Dorian. The thing's spinning around. Any tropical storm, depression, hurricane can produce tornadoes. You choose to stay, that's all right. It's just a tropical storm, not a big deal. Have multiple ways to get warnings. Make sure your phone is charged up. Have a battery-powered NOAA weather radio. You're not going to be out shopping, but you're going to be in your home, and we want you to get to the lowest level interior room quickly. Tropical tornadoes produce enhanced damage. So for Dorian, really a nothing storm for most of us except Emerald Isle, Cedar Island, and then Ocracoke, of course. In this case, it was a tornado. We had tornadoes up to Richmond, Virginia from Florence. So when I give this talk, at this point, one of our past summer students had said, it's kind of a down talk. All these crazy things that can hit us, and that's why I love when young people work with us. Miss Time Brown is our NOAA scholar this year. I like the young people to give us a different perspective than the old scientists. I am getting old and has been doing this a long time. So this is kind of defeatist. Man, ho hum, we get all these impacts. We're live in a vulnerable area. We live in an awesome area. You can't beat our area. But it's our responsibility to prepare each and every year. I have zero control over how many storms we get. We might get nothing. But you do have control over working on your hurricane kit. You do have control over sharing it with the neighbor that couldn't make it this year. You have control over not just focusing on the category, saying, I'm not going to leave unless it's a 3. So we do have a lot of control. We can't stop the storms, but a few times in a year, we just have to be prepared to either leave or hunker down. And then the rest of the year, we enjoy the awesome weather that we have here in Carteret County. That's my email. If you can't tell, I love weather. I love to talk about it. We want to be in your community. We'll talk any hour of the day, any day of the week, any church, any venue. Email me. These community gatherings, wherever Miss Karen is, thank you very much for having us. This is what it's about. I know a lot of us have experience. Some of us don't. Hopefully you learned something new today. We appreciate everybody up front that's going to answer some of the questions you have. This is what it is about community. We have a strong community here, but we can't help others unless you invite us and encourage us to come to things like this. So shoot me an email if you want us to come to your venue. We'll be happy to give a talk. And I hope that was 20 minutes, because I know Karen will crack the whip if it wasn't. Well, I'm going to say that's pretty good. All right, thank you.
Good evening, can you hear me? I am Stephen Ray. I'm Stephen Ray, I'm the Emergency Services Director for Carteret County. I have with me Commissioner Chadwick, Gordy, So, we have some questions that Karen asked us to do, and so we're going to go through these questions first, and then afterwards we'll have get some questions from you guys and answer those questions as well. So the first question I have is, can I buy flood insurance now that it's almost hurricane season?
So the answer to that is yes, you can buy flood insurance. Anyone can buy flood insurance at any time. You do have a 30-day waiting period. There's a couple instances where that waiting period would be waived. If you modify, sign up for a new loan, there's no waiting period. And if you're newly mapped into the special flood hazard area, there's a 1-day waiting period. So for example, if you were outside the special flood hazard area, and you're newly mapped in, you've got 13 months to make a change to your insurance when you would only have to wait 1 day. And Aaron Futrell with the State of North Carolina Department of Public Safety filled me in that there is no waiting period for private flood insurance.
There are a couple companies that are participating in the private flood insurance program, and there is no waiting period for that. So it's a little bit different than the NFI program. I do have map change information in this folder, so if there's any questions about when the maps are newly adopted, you can pick up one of these packets, this folder, and have them. So get your information. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And just to expound on the flood insurance a little bit, so coverages for personal coverage, the limit is $250,000 for structure, $100,000 for contents, and for commercial it is $500,000 contents, $500,000 structure.
Thank you, Greg. So the next question is, what is DOT doing to prepare the roads for storm season?
Thanks, Steve. So I'm assuming the question is kind of related to what are we doing to prepare for a hurricane, and in the event of a forecasted hurricane. And in that instance, DOT, we do have a satellite yard facility storage space that is a cooperative agreement with the county, thanks to the administration and commissioners on Ames Gilligan. And ahead of a storm, what DOT will do is we'll stockpile material, rock, to replace roads if they're washed out, that sort of thing, and stockpile equipment and fuel ahead of the storm, so that it's on this side. And that's about what we can do to prepare. Not knowing where the storm's going to hit, not knowing when, what direction it's coming in and where the damage will be. That's all we can do is prepare for the worst.
Thank The next question is there somewhere in the eastern part of the county that a helicopter can land with supplies or to rescue somebody? So as Eric told you guys earlier, all storms are different. We do have several landing zones throughout the down east portion of the county. As long as these are safe for the helicopter to put down materials or to rescue personnel during the storm, then we do have that capability. We work well with our Coast Guard and other agencies that have helicopters that can happen. You guys are going to be bored now because I think most of these other questions are me answering. So, where down east will supplies be staged before the storm? The only pre-drop supplies that we will be given is for the Down East Fire Department, and it's staged at the Atlantic Fire Department. Although these are delivered pre-storm, they are not distributed pre-storm. To the citizens, this is done pre-storm to be assured that there will be post-storm supplies available for the ones that need them. Our next question is, can supplies be staged so they are more accessible sooner? It's basically the same answer. We do ask the citizens to make sure that you have enough supplies on hand for at least 72 hours. We did learn during Florence 72 hours is not enough. And I thank Eric for bringing up a week, because if you keep supplies for a week, then we can have supplies come in from the state and other places to get to the people that need those supplies. We're going to get into sheltering. What is the nearest shelter to Down East in the county? And are there plans for additional shelters? The nearest post-storm shelter to Down East is Beaufort Elementary School. So what you need to know about that, that's post-storm. So pre-storm and during the storm, there will be no sheltering at Beaufort Elementary School. It's just a post-storm shelter. And then the closest one for sheltering during the storm is Newport Middle School. And due to the possibility of being inaccessible during the storm, most of the areas down east do not fit the criteria for storm shelter. So down east is very vulnerable. You guys can be landlocked at any point in time, and that's why we cannot provide sanctioned shelters down east. We want to get you away from the harm. If we put a shelter in the middle of the harm, that is not good for us. We're looking out for your lives, and I know you guys are looking out for your property. What can I do with my pet? So, Carteret County Emergency Services, when we open our storm shelter in Newport, it does have a pet shelter with it. We do ask that if you bring your pet there, that you stay with your pet, please, because we don't have the personnel that can take the pets out and feed the pets at the same time. So we would still need you to care for your pets, and then we will have times for you to come in to your personal pet. Atlantic School, will it be available? Will other schools be open for shelters? So, due to the American Red Cross not being able to sanction Atlantic School as a shelter, Carteret County cannot promote Atlantic School as a shelter. However, we all know here that the community is going to open Atlantic School. We still support Atlantic School. That's why we have pre-drop supplies going to open, to make sure that there is supplies necessary for that shelter. We cannot promote the shelter. We cannot put it out to the media as a shelter that is open. So it's Atlantic School in our Emergency Operations Center. It's Atlantic School, it's not Atlantic Shelter, because we cannot promote it as a shelter.
She's open.
What's that?
She's open, baby.
Yes, yes.
She'll be open.
So this question asks, what are the emergency contacts for down east? There needs to be a storm shelter options down east. We talked about that, and I'm guessing the person's asking the wellness center at sea level. Is that the old Pruitt building? Okay, so the emergency contacts for down east are the same as they are on a sunny day. You can always contact the emergency services office, and for general questions, we will answer any questions that you have. If you have concerns, we can talk to you more about those. If you have a true emergency, you need to call 911. The wellness center at Pruitt does have an evacuation plan. They do have an emergency operations plan. They have submitted it through the emergency services office. We have reviewed it just like any other facility throughout Carteret County. So all the nursing homes have to have an emergency operation plan, and we review those every year as well. Is there a list of residents? So this one is there a list of residents with special needs that is regularly updated in the event of a storm? Is there a place for elderly to go during the storm? So over here on the table, I have 2 packs of our medically fragile forms. Those forms are for people that have any medical condition. We also ask the elderly to fill them out. That form is good because of the data that we collect, we put into a database. Before every storm, our Carteret County medics come, some of them that are not working that day will come in. They call everybody on that list. We make sure that they are either going to leave the county as a choice of theirs. If they're going to come to the shelter, make sure that they have everything they need for the shelter. We also see if they have the ability to make it to the shelter. We do provide transportation as necessary if they don't have transportation to the shelter. If they're going to stay at home, we're going to talk to them. We're going to make sure they have a plan and make sure that we have phone numbers so we can contact them just in case their phone dies or goes out. But our medically fragile paperwork has been a blessing. We have about 250 to 350 people on it right now. You know, that's not touching everybody, so we would like to touch everybody with it and grow that form. We do have a medically fragile shelter inside Morehead City. It's ran by nurses from Carteret General Hospital. If it's a low number that goes to that shelter, they may move that shelter to the hospital. But it's at the Leon Mann Center, and so that's our medically fragile shelter. Next question talks about patients on oxygen. What do patients on oxygen do if the power goes out and they cannot afford a generator? So oxygen-dependent people, when you're placed on oxygen, you have a company that delivers your oxygen to you, because we know that you're not on a concentrator consistently. That oxygen company should be called well in advance of the storm hitting land and spoken to. They can bring you out oxygen tanks and enough oxygen tanks to hopefully get you through the storm. And that's a service that they should and do provide for that person. Going into evacuation. If I leave, can I get back? Carteret County does not have a re-entry program. Both banks, municipalities have a re-entry program. If you leave Carteret County, we do not block the exits, we do not block the entrances of the roads to get back in. If it's dangerous to be back, you will be notified via media and asked to stay away. But we do not have the emergency services personnel, and I know the sheriff does not have enough personnel either to block all the entrances into Carteret County. Now, if you want to go over to both banks, they will stop you at the Atlantic Beach Bridge and ask for your reentry pass, or at the Emerald Bridge for a reentry pass. If you don't have one there, then you can't get to both banks. New rest home on Highway 70 be evacuated. So they have an emergency plan. We do not dictate when they implement the emergency plan. We do review their emergency plan, and it's up to their administration to follow their emergency plan. Is there money anywhere to help people afford to evacuate? There is. I learned today, and there's several nonprofits in Carteret County that are willing to help people that are in need. So, because I had the answer that there isn't, but there are some nonprofits in the area that if you go to them and you're in need, they will help you with this endeavor. Insurance companies, if it's a mandatory evacuation, most insurance companies will pay for, will reimburse you from your insurance for evacuation if it's mandatory. Some of them will do it for a voluntary evacuation. That's something that you would have to check with your insurance companies. So, next one is roads. Will roads be raised in the event of flooding as a long-range plan?
So I understand the purpose of that question, and that's, if the road's up high enough, it's dry, you're able to get from point A to point B. So to raise a road, there's only a couple ways to do that. One would be an elevated pier structure, like an elevated bridge, and we've seen a couple of those now being in the East North Carolina, different places. And so the benefit of that is you reduce environmental impacts because it's just these piers that reach down, and in between the piers it's undisturbed. And you also reduce potential impacts on adjacent properties because it is natural between the piers. So if water comes in, it can go out. The problem with that is a lot of homes access directly on US 70 running down east. They would lose their access because you have this elevated bridge, and then how do you get from the home to this bridge in a safe manner? So that's kind of off the table. The only other way to do that would be to build the road up. To make any kind of impact, you're talking at least a couple of feet. And I'm just throwing that out, and if I'm wrong, please let me know. But we're talking about a couple of feet. And as you build up, you also have to build out, right? Because your roadway shoulders, ditches, pipes, everything gets pushed back wider and wider. Again, if we're talking about US 70, we're aware that that's not even possible in some places due to the canal ditches that we have in place now. To build up would require an environmental permit. The environmental permit would require that we would have no negative impacts on the adjoining properties. A build up, I'm going to hold water on both sides of the road, I'm going to impact adjoining properties. So I probably will not get an environmental permit. So these are, I mean, it's a question, and I appreciate where it's coming from. Theoretically, it's going to be, I don't want to say impossible, but almost impossible, right? It would be way above me. We need to start inviting, Raleigh, Washington D.C., some of those people down here to answer some of that question. So right now, the answer is we're not planning on raising any of our existing roads. ahead of a storm.
Thank you. Will Open Grounds Farm be available for evacuation, emergency usage in case of flooding or bridge outage along Highway 70? If so, how is it coordinated? So evacuations are always done pre-storm. They are done, and this, I hear from people, well, I didn't evacuate because it was sunny. Well, we're trying to get you away from harm before the harm gets here. That's why evacuations happen so early. And in Carteret County, we have 72,000 people that we have to, if we're going to evacuate the whole county, that we need to move out of the county before our first tropical storm lands. So as far as evacuations and using Open Grounds Farm, that's probably not reasonable. But our emergency services we do have ways to get a hold of the owners of Open Grounds Farm. We've used them several times. During the tornadoes in Atlantic and Parker's Island, we did use Open Grounds Farm to bring the ambulance from South River over to that area. So we do have consideration from them to use it as necessary, and our communication center will contact Open Grounds Farm, or our emergency operations center will contact the owners of Open Grounds Farm if it's necessary to use their road. But it is a private facility, and they can say no at any time because it is their private. Who will decide when to close North River? Most of it, well, it's DOT, to be honest with you, but at some points in time, our sheriff's office will go out there because of the safety of it. And they don't shut down North River Bridge, they just stop you from going across the danger.
Oh, yes. So, he's absolutely correct. That's an evacuation route, and at no point DOT wants to close that route. We want to leave it open at all times. The only time we would close it is if it washes out completely, right? Then we're going to barricade it because we don't want anybody going by. The Highway Patrol, they also have that authority if they deem it unsafe. That in the event that there's an accident on the bridge and they need to get it cleaned up, they will stop traffic in order to do that. The biggest problem is going to be, all of us in the room, is that somebody's going to decide to try to drive through that water in a low vehicle. They're going to stall out. It's a 2-lane road with no room on the shoulders to go anywhere else. So when they do that, they block the whole road. And now, how do we get people there to rescue them, to get that off the road? And you see the problem starts compounding real quickly. The road's open. If you can safely navigate the road, do so. If the road's flooded, please don't try it. You know, we have personal responsibility. And, just ask that you don't try it, because it inevitably leads to something bad happening when somebody tries to do that. So, but as far as the bridge being closed, unless it is completely unsafe, it will not be closed by law enforcement or DOT.
What's the plan if North River Bridge goes out? So the Emergency Operations Center will work our emergency plan as a whole. We do have plans in place. Every emergency is different. I can't give you exacts right now of what we would do during that time. There would be more involved than just county personnel in the case of that happening.
You would call Gordon.
Yes, and have him build us a bridge.
This is well, y'all know it. It's a very sensitive area, and it goes under quickly. Right there at the North River Bridge, the Thomas Fields, going into Beaufort, they flood easily and often, and not during a hurricane, during routine events. So again, we have to be careful, be prepared. If we're going to stay, you have everything in place so you're not having to run out. y'all have seen it, you'd be amazed how many people in the middle of a storm want to go out and drive to see what the storm's doing. And that is so dangerous. Please encourage everybody to stay home and not do that, right? So that Steve and his crowd, they can do what they need to do so that DOT can do what they need to do safely. But that road does go out due to flooding, and it's the same thing as Highway 70. So we're not going to close it unless it's washed into, and we're going to encourage you not to drive, but ultimately that choice will be yours.
The next two questions have already been answered. One's about Open Grounds Farm. The other one, I think the lady from NC State and the lady from UNC answered those about what places on 70 are most likely to flood. Does the county have a way to get help to communities with the road flooding? Yes, so several of our agencies after Florence, one of them being Parkers Island Fire Department, purchased or received high water vehicles. There are 3 right now in Carteret County that we have access to right away. So we can access those. We have drivers for them. Matter of fact, in the down there on 70 past Tiffany Woods or near Tiffany Woods, North Harbor, when that flooded sometime last year, there was a pregnancy coming from South River, and the ambulance was coming from Beaufort, and so we did use Harkers Island high water vehicle that day to transport the pregnant lady to the ambulance because of the flooded water. So we do have access to them. They're readily available for us. One of the pre-storm requests that we make to the state each time is for 3 high water vehicles. We will still make that request. That way, hopefully we'll have 6 in the county instead of just 3. Will the fire department stay open during and after the storm? So the fire departments and EMS departments in the county are 24/7. They will respond to any call during that time unless their safety is at risk. And if their safety is at risk, we request them not to go. And at some point in time, when it comes to EMS, we will stop EMS until it's safe for them to be back out.
Yeah, I'll take that. So the next 2 questions are about flooding. I'm not going to read them to you. They're especially long, but it has to do with drainage and flooding. I'll just give you a quick synopsis about the paragraphs of the question.
Use the microphone.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was talking a lot on my part. My bad. All right. So the next 2 questions are about flooding. They're about a paragraph long, so I'm going to paraphrase. And the gist of them is around drainage. So what's the county doing about drainage? So last year, we asked for and received $12 million from the legislature as a direct appropriation. It's the largest appropriation in the state to address drainage in Carteret County. To date, we're about $7 million into that $12 million. And the impetus and the focus of what we were doing is outfalls. So DOT, we've got a great partner in DOT. Gordy and I talk sometimes multiple times a day. And use each other kind of as a force multiplier. If there's an area that he knows with the roadside ditch, it would be great if he went in and cleaned it, but when you get to that outfall, it's to no end because the outfall's clogged. He communicates with me, and vice versa. If there's a roadside ditch that we could help with that outfall. So anyway, we're $7 million into that right now. So additionally, we applied for and received RCCP funding. Beth Meyer, our consultant with Duke area, is sitting over here. I hope y'all will take a chance and speak with her before you leave about any specific areas. And that's really to look at, several years ago, I guess probably 10 years ago, the term shovel-ready project was really popular. So if you could deliver a shovel-ready project, something that had been engineered, you identified the issue, it was the buzzword at the time, but if you could identify the issue, you could have an engineered plan of how to address it. Funding was relatively easy to get. So that's really what we're trying to do with the RCCP funding. It encompasses all of down east, everything from East Carter Corner to Cedar Island, and also North River, Merriman, and South River. So those areas, so we're in the midst of that project now. We have 7 community members that have been appointed to that committee. We've had a couple of meetings, and we're working through that and hope to have that finished up and have some shovel-ready drainage resiliency projects to move forward with in the coming years. And there is some funding attached to that on the pipeline. So.
Is there a plan to better coordinate emergency response in the county, fire department, churches, forestry, etc.? So since Florence, yes, there is. So since Florence, we have noticed that most of that was a communication issue. We have put in 4 ham radios partnering with our ham radio organization here in Carteret County into 4 of the fire departments. We feel like the fire departments are the biggest part of the community. They're able to get information out to you guys quickest. So we have put those in the fire departments, and we have ham radio organization also train those folks on how to use a ham radio. Right now, these are installed in Down East Fire Department, Parkers Island Fire Department, Moorhead, and Western Carteret. And there's plans to have one more put into a Mill Creek Fire Department. Asking about cell service and who's in charge of the towers and the gas. Cell phone companies are in charge of that service. Who decides where the Baptist men go to help? The Baptist men and the nonprofit organizations will post form or who they decide where they're going, who they're helping. We assist with coordination with them, but we don't coordinate for them. Who makes decisions on Down East supplies and help after the storm? So the Emergency Operations Center does that. We have about 35 people in our operations center. These people goes from planning to operations, and we have a volunteer that helps us do donations. We have a supply person, and so that's how everything is sorted out. And with Down East being unincorporated, that's who makes that decision. I think that's really the end of the questions. I know I was asked another question, worst case scenario. Worst case scenario Down East. Do we have plans for it? Yes, we have plans for it. We hope it never comes. But there are plans in place. Down East has some wonderful fire departments, wonderful EMS departments here that are supported very well by emergency services. We know that the fire departments here will get out and work right away. We, in the Emergency Operations Center, will make sure that we notice that this is going to happen. We will already have supplies and resources headed our way. I want you guys to feel comfortable knowing that we are here for you. You are not here for us. We are here for you. And that's how we take every storm. So, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What's the biggest lesson learned from Florence as far as
If you have a question, there's a mic here, and we're trying to record this, so that would be great.
biggest lesson the emergency services learned from Florence, and how is that going to play out in the next hurricane?
Yes, ma'am. So, like I said, I think one of the biggest lessons was the communications. We did a wonderful job in the Emergency Operations Center. We just didn't let you guys know how wonderful of a job we were doing. The communications to you guys so we've done better with social media. Our PIO is working more with the fire departments on getting our social media out to them. Also, trying to get ways to get them pamphlets to you guys. You know, during a storm, we can't get the pamphlets out, so you guys can have pamphlets and know what's going on. That's where the ham radio comes in. So ham radio is probably going to be, they call it the cockroach of radio systems. It's going to be the one that's going to be around forever. And so this way we can still communicate to the fire departments and get the fire departments to communicate with the citizens.
Do all the fire departments down east have auxiliary power?
I think so. The only one that I would question is maybe Marshallburg and then Davis.
Davis has a generator.
Okay, so yes.
We also, during Florence, when we had Davis set up kind of as a command center, back then we didn't have a public information officer, Nick Wilson, that we have now. We will bring in rental generators so we can run our tractor trailers full of ice. Of course, they have their own diesel fuel tanks on their Thermokings. We also can plug them in for electricity. And also we could run the scout building, run the air conditioning in the scout building so people could come and get refreshed. And we also had, for probably over a week, I know Neil and Lisa and Catherine run lines of food, Salvation Army, different groups. They were there weeks, serving meals and set it up like almost like a convenience store. So we'll bring in power if we need it.
Any other questions?
Providing equipment like Davis was up for a while. Fortunately, had quite a support that luck that didn't quit. But the county has a way to have a piece of equipment delivered after the storm. It's got to be around or something, delivered to other locations so we can unload efficiently supplies to be delivered at. To be distributed to other places, other stations. And that addressed or
Yeah, so any of those requests would come through our operations center and we would make it to the state, or if at the time there is a rental company out there, we can get a rental agreement to go ahead and have this stuff delivered. So yes.
Could some already be put in place for that? Like, so you already have an agreement with somebody, so it's immediate? In case a storm does happen, or no, when the storm happens, and we need those supplies? Because we were fortunate in Davis to have somebody that was very generous to let us use theirs.
And so I would have to say that depends. And it just depends on the track of the storm, because if the track of the storm's coming to Davis, we don't want to put stuff in harm's way, but we want to be able to get it to you as quick as possible.
Yeah, deliver afterwards, but already have it lined up.
Oh, yes, yes. So, yes, so that would be done through the Emergency Operations Center. So one thing that people don't understand about our Operations Center, it does not start up the day before the storm. We start up, so we usually have a 5-day notice before a storm's coming, and we usually start on the the day before the 5th day. So that way, so we can start 6 days out to start getting these things in place, especially if we understand the track of the storm is going to be imminent here. So we can have these agreements and everything else. We also have agreements already put in place for several things, like fuel, and different ice, different things like that have already been put in place.
One other thing that you just mentioned, sure. It worked really well last time, but the sheriff's department, state, out west, we had Cherokee, Little County, that worked really well. So whatever you did to make that happen, so they want security, the fire department tonight, but the sheriff's department in the county has already stretched in, so these guys came in, but that agreement was.
So we have to thank Sheriff Asa Buck for that, and being part of the Sheriff Association. Any other questions? I would like to thank everybody that came out tonight. Remember, we have our medically fragile paperwork over here. We also have Code Red. Code Red is a phone service, so you can get notifications as we push them out. And there's also a wonderful book that the state EM put together that talks about your kits to put together and other resources that are available pre-storm and post-storm. But thank you guys for coming out.
And thank you all for coming. And thank those resource people again around the side of the room. I would encourage you to ask them the questions you need to ask them. Also, there's a clipboard going around with your name, for your name and stuff, please. Sign that if you can so that we can keep in touch. But thank you for coming.